So, was that a first race that we all enjoyed? The Racing Pembo. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, back to the Racing Pembo. I am the Racing Pembo. It's a pleasure to see you all again. Thank you to anyone who has been watching on the Billy and the Facebook and YouTube as of late. I have only posted one video so far. Anyway, welcome to a segment called the Armchair Review. And today, we're talking the Australian Grand Prix. Armchair Review! So, Albert Park, Australia. Teams descended for the first round of the 2026 Formula One World Championship. My 26th season as a fan of F1. Now, a lot of the talk beforehand was of all the new rules and regulations and just what it would do for the racing. There were pre-season favourites in Mercedes, and as the race went on, Mercedes duly lived up to their pre-season favourites tags as George Russell, king of the T-pose, went on to claim victory. And Kimi Antonelli finished second in a Mercedes 1-2. But there were a lot of other stories that went around during that weekend. So let's get into it. We start with the reigning champion, Lando Norris, and we start with Max Verstappen, both of whom have been extremely critical of late about F1's new direction. They said it's anti-F1. The very idea that you're driving along a straight and you have to do what they call super clipping, which is where, as you're going along a straight, the driver has to downshift through the gears to build up more power into the battery to then go for it. They're saying it's all artificial and that Formula One loses the very essence of what it is. Which, okay, everyone's entitled to an opinion. But Lewis Hamilton was saying the same thing about F1 during the ground effect era of 22 to last year. And I'm pretty sure other drivers have all said the same thing over the years. Why are we paying attention to this? Why is this a big thing? It's because Lando was about as far from winning as you could be, and Max had just binned it into the wall in qualifying. He did subsequently produce a tremendous drive from 20th up to 6th. But you get the sense that if they were in winning cars, it wouldn't be an issue. Like Lando last season didn't say anything about the rules. He didn't say anything about the ground effect cars because he was winning races. F1 drivers are very, very fickle. And at the end of the day, they might say one thing, the fans might say another. Speaking of Lewis Hamilton, there's a theme that usually develops in pre-season testing, and that is Ferrari show their speed, and instantly everyone goes, oh, Ferrari are going to challenge, and then it comes to the first race and they do nothing. However, for about 20 or so laps, certainly for the early stages of the Grand Prix, it looked like Ferrari weren't actually just challenging, they might have actually won it. Charles Leclerc started fourth, got off the line superbly. It was said that Ferrari's launch control system is pretty mega, and that was proved. He was up to first by turn 1. Hamilton had got himself up to third, and there was a ding-dong battle between Leclerc and Russell for the lead. I think they swapped positions 7 times in the opening 9 laps, which is unheard of. You don't see, or certainly you never saw in the past, changes for the lead happening like this, lap after lap after lap after lap. As a fan watching it, regardless of whether you think it's artificial or whatnot, it was damn entertaining. It was. It was nice to see, no, you go in front. No, I want to go back in front. No, I'm going to go in front. No, I'm going to go back in front. It was brilliant. And Ferrari were in it to win it. Leclerc had the pace in the early stages, as did Hamilton. That small little turbo they've got for launches really put them up in contention. However, as good as the drivers are, the strategists, not so great. There was a virtual safety car after Isaac Hadjar's Red Bull decided to go bang. And during a virtual safety car, for those of you who don't know, a driver's speed is monitored through a delta. The driver has to achieve a certain speed, which means it's slower than what they're actually travelling at. However, there is no VSC limit in the pit lane. The pit lane speed limit is still the pit lane speed limit, which during a virtual safety car is faster than what the cars are going out on track. So you could effectively go in, have a very cheap pit stop, you lose less time than you would under normal racing green flag conditions. Ferrari had 2 opportunities to pit their drivers in, get them out, and then maybe they could have hounded Mercedes for the rest of the race. The first time around, they didn't. I kind of understood maybe why, but then as the laps went on, I thought maybe they should have brought them in. The second one, that made their decision after the first VSC look terrible. Valtteri Bottas had stopped the car, his Cadillac, more on them later, right at the entry of the pit lane, which meant the pit lane entry was closed. So if Ferrari were thinking of, we're going to change our strategy now, it was a bit too late. Definitely felt like an opportunity missed for Ferrari. However, it bodes well for the rest of the season. If they can iron out the strategical misdemeanors, and that's a really fancy way of saying strategical cock-ups, then maybe, just maybe, Ferrari might actually be back. Can you imagine? It's been nearly 20 years since they've won a title. Kimi Raikkonen, 2007. I'm not kidding. It's been a while. So 3rd and 4th is a solid result. It's the best they've had in the last 12 months. However, there is a case of opportunity missed. Fair play to Hamilton, though. He looked like he was having a great time. There were 2 new teams going into the season as well. Audi, which is technically Sauber, but they were bought out by Audi, and Cadillac. Now, Audi may have brought out Sauber, but the power unit they're using is brand new. And Nico Hülkenberg probably hates it, as he never got a chance to even race. Yes, his car conked out before the start of the race, and they just couldn't get it fixed in time. So Hülkenberg wasn't going to start. Gabriel Bortoleto, however, drove brilliantly. He qualified in the top 10 on Saturday and was assured, he was calm, made the moves he needed to make to finish 9th and give Audi points on debut. As for the other new team, Cadillac, it didn't go so well. Although Sergio Perez did finish the race, albeit about 3 laps down, it's a solid start. It's a base to build from. But they weren't exactly quick. And you just get the sense that if Aston Martin weren't driving a tractor, then Cadillac would be the slowest team on the grid. However, they are brand new. Much as Audi are new in the sense of the power unit, and that it's a big car company taking over, the core of it is still Sauber. Whereas Cadillac is brand new from the ground up, and they've been working on this for 1 to 2 years. So there's a base to start with. Perez finishing is always good because it means the car is reliable. Valtteri Bottas, as I mentioned earlier, his engine went outside the pit lane. So a mixed day for Cadillac, but it was very telling that apparently after the race, Cadillac team managers and whatnot messaged Perez to say, yo, congratulations, well done for finishing this and that. And Perez's response was just, right, that's good, we move on. Experienced driver, you see, a man who's been at the front. He's like, I'm not settling for last. We are going to develop and develop, which is why Cadillac made the best decision in bringing those 2 in. The curse of Australia strikes again. It is a damning statistic that ever since Melbourne became the Australian Grand Prix in 1996, actually any Australian Grand Prix, an Australian driver has never finished on the podium. Daniel Ricciardo did in 2014, but then he was disqualified. Mark Webber, driving a championship-winning Red Bull, never, ever scored a podium. Mental. Oscar Piastri came so close to winning the race last season before, due to wet conditions, his McLaren decided to go rallying with terrible, terrible consequences. He did eventually score points, which is a lot better than what he did this year. On the lap to the grid, he came out of turn 4 and his car decided, there's a wall. I'm going to go hit that wall. Now, many people are saying it was a torque surge or something like that. Do you remember when torque surge was just a really posh way of saying driver error? Was it driver error? We don't know. It doesn't strike me as a mistake that Oscar would make. But nonetheless, Waltzing Matilda is going to have to wait to be played on the podium for at least another year. And it's a bad start for my pre-season favourite. Very bad. Oh no. Have I said a curse? If anybody had the Jekyll and Hyde of all weekends, it was Kimi Antonelli. First 2 practice sessions, solidly. Final practice 3, before qualifying, he got a little bit too loud on the throttle and smacked the wall. Fair play to the Mercedes mechanics who rebuilt that car in 3 hours. And he got through the first couple of qualifying sessions. However, he was also the reason why a qualifying session was red flagged, when not 1, but 2 bits of the car, cooling springs I think they were, decided to make their great escape. One of them ended up in the gravel trap, the other ended up in the middle of the track whilst everyone was doing fast laps, something Lando Norris found out when he decided to become the world's most expensive vacuum cleaner. But nonetheless, that aside, Kimi stuck the car in second on the grid and drove a calm, measured, assured race to finish second, which matches his highest finishing position in Formula One. George is undoubtedly the team leader, let's be honest, but you just get the sense that with a bit more confidence, Kimi is going to challenge. I actually think Kimi will win a race this year. In fact, I'd like to see that. Arvid Lindblad went into this season as the only rookie on the grid, and my word, did he smash it out of the park. What a day. He was out-qualified by Lawson by a tenth or so of a second, but come race day, it was a different story. Lawson dropped like a sack of cack, and Lindblad just kept going and got points on debut. An excellent drive by the young Brit. And speaking of Brits, I've got to give a shout out to the Bear, Ollie Bearman. I said in my pre-season predictions that he'd be a driver to watch out for, because when he was scoring points in the Haas, he was outstanding. Especially the race in Mexico where he almost got a podium. Well, it might not have almost got, it might have actually never been on the cards. But at the time, that there was hope. And I'm not one of those who, just because I'm British, I'm going to be, supporting every single British driver. No. Drivers from all nationalities, I like them regardless, unless their name is Lance Stroll, who brings shame to the nation of Canada. More on Aston Martin in a second. But Ollie Bearman, I genuinely think this season, if he keeps scoring the points, Haas will back him as their number 1, and I could see Ferrari come crawling, but that also depends on what Leclerc and Hamilton decide to do. It's an interesting thing. If you were Ferrari, what would you do? If Bearman, I don't know it's only the first race, but if Ollie Bearman goes the rest of the season scoring point after point after point and doing brilliantly, outdriving the machinery he's given, what do you do at Ferrari? Do you decide, actually, you know what, we'll bring him in like a year early? Or do you say, right, do one more season at Haas, then there's a place at Ferrari for you? Because you've got to think that if the Ferrari is good throughout the rest of the season and they're challenging, Leclerc's going to have some hope and Hamilton's just going to stay there. It's a very, very interesting thing, because it'd be a crying shame if Ollie doesn't get the chance to drive for the team that's actually backing him in his career. Okay, we now need to talk about the elephant in the room, and that is Aston Martin, who are in big trouble. It all started in testing, where Lance Stroll, a man who has about as much... Okay, we need to talk about the elephant in the room, and that is Aston Martin. Pre-season testing, they weren't slow. They were abysmally slow. They were up to 4 seconds off the pace. That's what Lance Stroll said. But then again, you take the opinions of Lance Stroll and the things he says with a very tiny, tiny pinch of salt. However, going into practice and qualifying, he wasn't wrong. The Aston Martin was terrible. The fact that Fernando Alonso almost got that car into Q2 and at the start found himself in the points is incredible. But the damage was already done, not just in testing, but during the Thursday media sessions, in which Aston Martin called a press conference, and Adrian Newey, the technical guru genius, who for some reason is now also the racing manager of the team. I don't quite understand that move myself. The man is good at making championship-winning cars. Get him to do that. Get someone else to do the management side of things. But either way, they were sat in the media room, and It was reported that Stroll said that if he did 15 laps in that car, the vibrations of it would be so bad that he'd have to stop. And the same with Fernando, 25 laps, and the car would vibrate so hard that they risk permanent nerve damage. Now, is the permanent nerve damage actually a thing, or are they just trying to be very, very overdramatic? We don't know. But the point is, it has to be taken seriously, and Aston Martin need to get on top of this. Otherwise, well, let's just say the dream empire that Lawrence Stroll has spent a lot of money to build up is going to look very, very, very bad. And with that, I think we've reached the end for this instalment of the Armchair review of the Australian Grand Prix. My driver of the day goes to Arvid Lindblad for getting points on debut, although there were actually a few people I could have given it to. And also George. And also Max as well. I haven't really said much about Max. One final note to say, poor Isaac. Qualified third in the Red Bull. And then the car decided it didn't want to be a car anymore and stopped working. He had the measure of Verstappen. Well, actually, he didn't really have the measure of Verstappen. Verstappen smacked it into a wall in Q1. But he did a good job. And I think he will break that curse of Red Bull number 2s. But anyway, driver of the day goes to Arvid Lindblad for me. As for move of the race, there were so many at the start. But before we do end, we should probably talk about, did the rules and regulations actually help improve the racing? Yes and no. Yes, because there was genuine excitement in the overtaking that was happening. It didn't feel as forced as DRS, I don't think. The fact that, yes, the drivers have the overtake mode, but also, you know, that the boost that they also have, the driver in front can use as well. It reminds me of IndyCar's push-to-pass system, which I think is a genuinely brilliant thing. However, there are things about these regulations that need ironing out. I agree with what a bunch of other people have said, which is a driver having to downshift on a straight just to build up power in the battery. No, you are driving on a straight at near 200 miles an hour and you're slowing down. The only time you should slow down is if you're about to brake, not halfway through. So that needs working on. And we will see over the next few races when the drivers and teams get to grips with these systems, whether the racing will actually improve or whether that was it for Australia. In terms of pros, though, the cars look sleek. Oh, my word. These are some of the sexiest F1 cars I have seen in a very long time. Certainly since the mid-2010s. And by that I mean 2010, 2011. Because 2012's cars were just pig ugly. They were not very good. Well, they were very good, but they weren't very nice to look at. So I think the new regulations have done that. And also, any drivers complaining that they have to work a bit harder to go through a corner. You're in the pinnacle of motorsport, allegedly. You should. You've had to work to get there. And people forget, Formula 1 is about who has the best car. The best driver and the best car. It was about that combination. Whereas all the junior formulas, like Formula 2, Formula 3, they're about which driver stands out, because everyone's got the same type of car. It's a single make chassis. That's how it works. So give it time, then we'll see. I think by the time we get to, let's say, Canada, we should have an understanding of how these rules now work and how the drivers go into battle, into combat, as it were. Because I'm like you normal people out there. I don't like the idea of lift and coast. I don't like the phrase tyre management. It's Formula 1. I like the idea of speed, going as fast as humanly possible. Safely, of course. Anyway, all that aside, that is the end of the Armchair review. That is the end of the Racing Pembo for this episode. If you enjoyed what you heard, script or no script, drop us a like and a comment. Always appreciated. Nice comments and constructive comments. And if you have any particular ideas you'd like to see me try, please let me know. Like I said, I want to do some racing video game based videos. I want to talk about more things like MotoGP. I haven't even talked about Formula 2 or Formula 3 that happened over the weekend, because I still need to catch up. I have to catch up on IndyCar. There's a lot of sports that I want to talk about more. Formula 1 will probably be the main thing, as that's well, that's the main motorsport I watch. So there's that. So if you have any suggestions, I do want to start doing some episodes dedicated to drivers and teams, and they will be a more scripted thing, so there'll be less of the stuttering. And yeah, I just genuinely want to build up a community that enjoys motor racing, that can keep their opinions respectful, but also feel like they have a platform where they can, talk, express themselves. So if you have any content ideas of things you'd like to see, let me know, and I'll try, because it's good to know. I want to engage with you, the peoples, the fans of F1. Even if you're not a fan of motor racing, hopefully I can educate you, or we can educate you. That is one of the main goals of the Racing Pembo. But in the meantime, thank you very much for watching. I will see you again soon, and as always, stick with the Racing Pembo.
Thanks for watching. See you next time.